Okay, our second method for solving quadratics is the square root property. Again, exactly what you're thinking, exactly what you're doing. It's called the square root property because that's what we're going to do. Okay, check this out. If I have x squared equals 4, what could x be in these problems? X could either be 2, but check this out. X could also be a negative 2. Huh? If you have a negative 2 squared, that still gives you a positive 4, right? And if you have a positive 2 squared, that's a positive 4. And that's the key to the square root property. When you go through and you solve this x squared equals 4, when you square root both sides, anytime you physically make the square root symbol, you have to write plus or minus. So x is actually equal to plus or minus 2. Now, if you're looking at this, remember we talked about that fundamental theorem of algebra? My highest degree is a 2. So how many answers do we have here? That's right, we got 2. X is a positive 2 and x is a negative 2. Good job. Now, when you go to enter that into my math lab, you're literally going to have to write both of those answers in there. Pardon me. So make sure that you're paying attention to how that works. Okay, let's take a look at these things. So here if I have example 2a, we get x squared is equal to 17. Now notice something different in this problem than the zero factor property. The only way you could do the zero factor property is if you could factor, but I have a squared term, but you're missing the x term in this. So if you just have a squared term, that's what makes you wide open to use the square root property. Okay, let's do it right now. When you have x squared equals 17, the goal is to isolate the squared term. That's already taken care of here, so that's super awesome. So now whenever you square root both sides, remember, anytime you physically make the square root symbol, what do you have to write? Plus or minus. So x is actually equal to positive and negative the square root of 17. And because you can't break down the square root of 17, done. Pretty cool, right? Let's do more. If we have example 2b, or not 2b, no, just kidding. Example 2b, x squared is equal to a negative 25. Again, we want to isolate that squared term. Check. What's next? Square root this guy. So let's do it right now. And anytime you physically make the square root symbol, what do you have to write? Plus or minus. I'm going to keep saying that over and over again. That drilled into the old noggin there. Soak that up. Anytime you make the square root symbol, you always have to write plus or minus. Now check this guy out. You have a negative 25, and where is it? Underneath the radical. So what's up with that? Anytime you have a negative under the radical, what do you have to do? Pull out the I. Right on. That's the one that we just did in section 1.3. So if you pull out that I, you know the square root of 25 is 5. So you get a whopping 5i. Again, how many answers do we have? 2. So when you go to write your answer in my math lab, you will have to separate them. So you'll have your positive 5i and your negative 5i. Because again, the highest exponent is 2. So you have your 2 intercepts there. Cool. Let's do more. Awesome. Here is example 2b. Pardon me, 2c. There we go. And I have x minus 4 squared equals 12. Now, it is going to be super duper tempting, if you will, to go ahead and FOIL that out. Don't do it. Because the whole purpose of the square root property is to take something that's squared. That whole set of parentheses, squared. So that's super awesome. It's way easier to use the square root property on this than try to FOIL it out and work with it that way. Way too much work. You're wasting everybody's time. So I've got this squared. You physically make the square root symbol, and anytime you make the square root symbol, what do you have to write? That's right, plus or minus. Now check this out. Is x isolated? Nope. I still have that minus 4 with it. So because I have that minus 4, we have to totally isolate x. The whole purpose of these problems is to solve for x, right? So let's do that. Here's the kicker. When you add 4, the 4 goes in front of the plus or minus. So you really have x is equal to 4 plus or minus the square root of 12. Because if you're looking at this, you really have the answers 4 plus root 12 and 4 minus root 12. All right? So your two answers there. So make sure whenever you do this, you put the 4 in front of your plus or minus. So you have those two breakdowns. Now, check this out. Am I finished? No way, Jose. What do you know about that square root of 12? We can break it down. That's right. So if I have this 12, you could break that down into 4 times 3. So what we really have is 4 plus, or minus in this instance, 2 square roots of 3. Cool. Make sure if you can ever break down a radical, that you do that. That'll make a difference in your answer. So make sure you're breaking down that radical. You want everything simplified, kind of like you do with fractions. Same concept. Awesome. That takes care of our square root property. Let's learn some more.